Good evening. Welcome to the Jefferson County Board of Education meeting on Monday, June 12th. If you please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about the delay this evening. Before we get started, you've always heard of the man behind the curtain, correct? Well, it turns out we've got the party behind the curtain tonight. We've got senior pictures going on. And I just want to, to give a quick shout out to Meyerly and Lowe, the photographers, and to two members of our staff, Dr. Rowan and Hans Vogel, for getting here and moving them back, moving us forward so we can make this happen simultaneously tonight. So thank you for your patience. First, we have the Deputy Superintendent for Instructional Support update, Mr. Banks.
Dr. Rowan is on her way down here. I would like to introduce Dr. Jen Rowan, who's going to give you an update on micro-credentialing program. So Dr. Rowan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And then we have Jen Stuntz here. Could you grab that folder for me, Jen, and go ahead and pass it out to our board members. I am here to talk about the micro-credential review, just the year in review. Thank you, Dr. Gibson-Learn. So over the course of this last year was our very first micro-credential offerings. We looked high and low for a group of people that did this for an entire school district. We're talking not only for the leaders or for the teachers, but also for our service professionals. And from what we can tell, there really wasn't another program out there. So we created our own. With partnership with Digital Promise, we created 6 unique micro-credential offerings called Understanding Trauma in the Brain, Finding Balance, Responding to Cultural Differences in Schools, Understanding Students Facing Challenges, Understanding Students in the Digital World, and Introduction to Restorative Practice in Schools. Our statistics are 3,752 micro-credentials were taken. Of those, 3,690 micro-credentials were awarded. That was a 98.3% success rate for everybody who took the micro-credentials this past year. Our total payout was $1,790,000 after eliminating those who are not eligible for the benefit or for duplicate entries. Now I have Jen Stuntz here tonight. We also had 20 different micro-credential assessors because once we created these micro-credentials, then we had to, for lack of a better term, grade them or review them. It was a double-blind review. So both the person who submitted the micro-credential and the person who was reviewing the micro-credential didn't know each other. There was no way for us to know. I'd like for her to come up to explain sort of what her experience was through this, this project.
Yes, so I was one of 20 of the microassessors this year. I probably reviewed about 150 of them across the board. And like she said, I had no idea who they were, whether they were my coworkers or from another school. I personally enjoyed being a microassessor because it allowed me to see, first off, what an amazing staff we have in Jefferson County Schools. I was telling Ms. Rowan today that some of the answers that people gave were just so immense in their description, in what they had read, what they had learned. There were paragraphs. The question would ask for 1 or 2 sentences, and they would give paragraphs on what they learned or how they could implement it in their job within the school system. We also, at my school, I'm here at Washington, so I know in my department, we had another microassessor come over and work with our department to complete some of these. And some of the feedback I received from my team was that it allowed them to work as a team. They were able to discuss, rather than just sit behind their computer and answer the questions, they were able to discuss the readings or the videos or any of the activities that came along with the micro-credentials. So it was kind of like a team building exercise for us here at Washington, at least in my department. Like I said, the thought process, they were very deep answers, very thought provoking, very reflective. I personally did all 6 of them. And so I found where my answers went one way as I was reviewing them, it kind of gave me some more thought process onto how they would use those in their roles or how I could implement it in mine as well as a counselor. They were very creative and out of the box. I feel like the topics were fantastic. But I think most importantly, the thing that I learned was that all of our staff, whether it was service personnel or professional, I couldn't tell who they were, but some of them would say, hey, I'm a bus driver for Jefferson County Schools, and I would use this way. So across the board, our staff, I was highly impressed with how smart and intelligent and willing to learn they were. So overall, it was a great process.
Thank you, Jen. She just highlighted that this program was created by Jefferson County Schools, by Jefferson County Schools employees, for Jefferson County School employees. So of the topic choices for next year, I know everybody's worried and excited about this. What we did was we took the topic choices that were narrowed down by last year's survey data, continuous formative feedback throughout this entire year, and micro-credential assessor review, which we met with them periodically throughout this year to see, just to check in, how are you doing? What do you notice? What can we help with, and how can we fix things? So of the topic choices, there were building communication skills, serving students with disabilities, customer service and conflict resolution, understanding trauma, part 2, and responding to cultural differences, part 2. And on the next slide, you will see which ones actually were the topics of interest this year to our professional and service groups. And they were serving students with disabilities as number 1, building communication skills as number 2, and customer service and conflict resolution. So next month in July, we will start to begin the process of creating the micro-credentials for the next year, which will be released by September 1st. Now, I know that there are questions and answers about this ongoing project, especially because it is brand new and it is innovative. Again, there is really no other district out there that I can find that is doing this type of benefit to retain and recruit very good staff. And these questions that I have narrowed down so far is, will staff have access to the past micro-credentials? Yes, staff will now have a library of micro-credentials to choose from. However, they're only paid up to the maximum incentive amount. For instance, you can't take the same micro-credential twice. You can't be paid $500 for doing the same thing 3 times. When will the micro-credential program start again? The micro-credential program will start on September 1st. We will release them throughout the year. And we have to think about the reason why we have this project, and it is to retain and recruit. If we open it up during July, we might have folks who get hired in July and then find another job in August. So we don't want to be, we want to make sure that this is really focused on the message that this board really set forth, which was to retain and recruit. So we're going to make sure that these are released throughout the school year as a measure to continue and to retain quality staff. How much will staff earn per micro-credential? That will remain the same at $500 per micro-credential, with an earning potential of up to $1,500 during the 23-24 school year. And what support will be in staff for successful completion? Each building will have a professional learning liaison to assist in the completion of the micro-credentials and organizing learning opportunities. Staff will have access to 6 classes to attend over the course of the school year outside of their working area, their working hours if they need support. And that was definitely one of my most favorite activities that we did this year, is to work with people all throughout the day outside of their working hours, and just sitting beside them and going through these micro-credentials, sometimes as a class and sometimes individually, and having some extra support for anybody to access this information. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me this evening? Yeah.
So anybody can do the credentialing,
The
employee?
Any JCS employee. There are stipulations on, they have to be a full-time JCS employee.
So my concern that I stated previously when this came up is that many staff have time during the summer to complete the credentials. I heard your argument that people might quit in September, they may quit in October, but why can't you offer it to established employees? And if they want to take it as a new employee, they have to wait till September. But there have been so many complaints from employees that they wish that they had time throughout the year to take these. The other concern is that last year they were told that July 1st they could start their credentials, but they weren't available till I think November. So they missed out on all that time, and then they quickly closed by May when they were too busy to take advantage of them. Some people did get to take advantage, but it just sounds like maybe we could be more flexible and accommodating to staff.
Yeah, so I will address both of your questions. The first question is, just as I kind of talked about before, is we do want this to remain the purpose of retainment and recruitment. And while I do understand and believe that it would be more convenient for our employees, I do understand too, we need to create them. They're not created. Because this is a unique program, we're not meeting until July to create these. So as of right now, they're not even in existence, right? So we need to make sure we have time for that as well. And the second question that you had, can you please remind me of some of the items that you addressed?
I just said that we should be more accommodating. I don't know that I had questions. I said that there were a lot of complaints that it was supposed to start
yes.
July 1st, but didn't start till much later. So there was a very small window of opportunity for them to take those first 6. And now there's only, is it 3 now? Did you say there's only 3?
Yes, there is only 3 starting next year as part of the budget process. The reason why we had to delay the start of the 6 micro-credentials is because of that creation process. It took longer than expected, unfortunately, but at the same time, we wanted to get it right and not rush it. That way, the staff still had around 5 to 6 months to complete all those micro-credentials. And each micro-credential, if they came to my class, took around 2 hours. So it still was a great payout.
It's my understanding that some of the service personnel who aren't as familiar with the content, it took them sometimes 6 hours.
Yes, and that is true. There were folks that have persevered and completed them in 6 and 7 hours, and that was amazing. There are people that talk to me about that. That's why when we do offer that class to try to walk people through, and if you hear of anyone who did that, first of all, congratulate them because that's amazing. But secondly, we want to make sure that people know about the class. That way we can walk them through and they can be the most successful. The question was, how do they find out about the class? The class will be on the website in the micro-credential section under the frequently asked questions. So it said, when should I take the micro-credential? If they click on that, they'll see when the class is. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. So you did say that if, like, say I take a class on the communication and I really, really like that. You did say it is available, so I can go back even though I won't get paid for it. Am I able to review the material because it was helpful to me, or how to deal with my special ed, school class, whatever it was that, I found helpful? They're able to do that. Is that correct?
Yes,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
no problem. Great questions, everyone. And thank you again for for this benefit. I do think this is unique and innovative to Jefferson County.
Dr. Rowan, before you run away, you're done with your presentation, correct?
I am.
So you're about to run away, is that correct?
I'm going to go back into the booth. So if you need me, I'll be here.
Well, I actually have a huge favor to ask. I know this is way not your pay grade, but being head of technology and IT, the copy machine seems to have possibly eaten some of our public comment requests.
Oh,
Is there any way that you could go to the copy machine and see if you can find them, just to make sure that everybody that did sign up properly has the opportunity to speak?
absolutely. I have no trouble doing that. I'll be right back with that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That other duties is assigned at the bottom of every job description comes in handy once in a while. All right, next we have the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held May 22nd, 2023, and the special meetings held May 17th, 24th, and 30th, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Joy. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the meetings from May 22nd, 17th, 24th, and 30th on 2023, say aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. Next up, we have citizens' comments. Just a reminder that all speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are prohibited from making negative or derogatory comments using a name or position by which an individual could be identified. Comments may not be threatening, profane, vulgar, or abusive, or the speaker will be required to cease his or her comments. First up, we have Ms. Bobby Block online, followed by Dana Anders. Oh, she's not on there? Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Dana Anders, followed by, oh, do we have her? Okay. Sorry, Ms. Anders. Ms. Block, can you unmute so we can hear you? Mr. Vogel, is there someone named Halbert online? Halbert?
And other duties as a son.
Thank you, ma'am. Halpern. Okay. Then next we have Ms. Anders, followed by Bill Gillette.
Good evening. I want to talk about the importance of taxes. Governor Jim Justice announced that 11 months through fiscal year 2023, year-to-date collections of more than 5.9 billion are a record, 1.72 billion above the year-to-date estimate, and 12.9% ahead of last year, breaking the all-time state record for total collections and total year-to-date surplus through the month of May. It's a historic accomplishment. And quote, he said, "I am beyond proud of all the hardworking West Virginians who made these numbers possible, and of all the companies far and wide who have invested in West Virginia, providing good paying jobs for our people. We are blessed." And, you know, the things that this allows us to do, the incredible surplus will allow us to continue making wise investments in our roads, our schools, our water systems, broadband, economic development, and much more. I want to say, I am a hardworking West Virginian, and I do pay my taxes, and I'm glad it's paying off. And our schools need a tax base. We need the monies. And I think it's important.
Good evening. My name is Bill Gillette. I'm a citizen resident of this county, Jefferson County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to talk tonight about the pilot agreement for Wind Hill Solar Plant. It causes me a bit of concern as a taxpayer of the county. We've seen pilot agreements before, not necessarily greatly successful in this county. We have solar plants that are being built in this county right now without a pilot agreement. And that company, Blake Solar, has built pilot solar farms across the country without pilot agreements. And they have no doubt that they're going to be a profitable for their shareholders. So I'm a little concerned that the Wild Hill Solar Plant has petitioned for tax relief in the form of a pilot agreement. It's a significant amount of money that we're leaving on the table as a county. Estimates have been for over the 40-year time period of the project, that the average taxes that the company would pay would be close to $4 million. The first year of the pilot plan agreement, if it went in place, would be a $200,000 payment, so significantly less. It would only go up slowly. It would only go up 2.5% per year at the beginning. It's weighted towards the end. We all know that's not inflation. That's not a lot of bang for our buck. Additionally, the company is asking for the ability to not put the energy out there on the wholesale market, but to specifically sell it to high-end users, sort of the Northern Virginia consumers of a lot of electricity in some of that high-tech areas. So they're asking for a lot of relief, and they're selling it at a high premium compared to what we would consider competitors. So I'm not really excited about the precedent we're setting there, especially since there's somebody here on the ground, bought the land themselves. That, you know, they seem to be much more invested in our county than this foreign company that's coming in and asking for this. There'll be jobs, sure. There'll be short-term construction jobs. This is not long-term jobs for the county. I just think that when somebody's coming in here asking to use our resources, our land, our sunshine, it's a resource that we should be getting the best bang for our buck. I mean, the previous speaker talked about how important it was to get taxes to help our local schools. I mean, I'm a parent of a high schooler, and I really think we could use a lot more infusion of cash, and I'm sure you guys, I'm preaching to the choir on that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Richard Ziegler, followed by Chrissy Weimer.
Good evening. My name is Richard Ziegler. Incidentally, I've been in solar farming ever since I was 2 years old, dropped a seed in the ground and covered it up. I'm just now, solar energy is just another way of harvesting the same thing we've been doing for years. Okay, I support the pilot program. In 1975, seed corn was sold by volume, the bushel. In the 80s, seed corn then went by weight, 50-pound bags, and now it's sold by the kernel count. And each time we have a new measurement change, the prices always go up. Currently, Wild Hill Solar by EDF is requesting a pilot program. As the tax rates change in the future, Wild Hill wants to have a constant rate of taxation that they can plan on that would be relatively locked in. Yes, taxation revenue for the county would be slightly lower than it would be otherwise, but there are no encumbrances. Since should the solar program not be able to be reasonable, profitable for the margin for the principal stakeholders, including the landowners, as far as the tax burdens go, it may go away. Others may go away as well if they find out that they cannot get a pilot program in the future if they decide that they need to after they finish out their paperwork. The farming community is shrinking due to age and health issues. We are more and more looking for retirement plans, yet still wish to hold off housing or having the family farms broken up or sold for housing developments. This is called land stewardship. Long-term leases for commercial solar facilities will protect the land for at least one generation, maybe two, from residential development. This is important not just to us, but to you as well. Yes, the land is slated for commercial projects, solar projects, and can be used for other things, but think on this. Within 2 miles of this school, Washington High School, there are 3 active housing developments. Also, Huntfield has 30 acres up front to yet be developed. Cave Quarters has another 50 units that they can put in as a minimum. There is what used to be orchard ground behind this school are several hundred acres that could all of farmland that could go into housing within a very short time. All these tracts of land, figuring at 3.2 students per acre, could require new facilities such as would require facilities for potentially several thousand students. This means the building of new schools, finding and hiring of new teachers, which currently don't exist, hiring more staff, buying of buses, building sanitary and water infrastructure, and acquiring the land in which all this is to be put on. Should most of the current farmland be sold, it would go to the highest dollar, which would be residential growth. And these things need to be addressed because farmers don't live forever. And there are so few of us that have the original outlay and support in order to start new. That it?
Thank you, sir. That's your
Thank you.
time.
My name is Christine Weimer. I'm representing Jefferson County Foundation today. And I too wish that I could have froze my income taxes when I first graduated from college, but clearly I couldn't. Please do not support the pilot or any tax abatement agreement for Wild Hill Solar or any other business. I want to be clear that the foundation supports solar. We do not support tax abatement deals. I would like to highlight 2 articles in the peer-reviewed literature. On the whole, the peer-reviewed literature actually says that pilot agreements and tax abatement agreements that are similar harm local economies and reduce the quality of local jobs. The first paper article I'd like to highlight is in Economic Development Quarterly. It's entitled, "Do Economic Development Tax Abatements Affect School Finances?" It was published on May 17th of 2023. It states in its conclusions, this article examines the association between the amount of abated taxes and school district revenues and expenditures in 2019 of 9 US states that have sufficient tax abatement data for such analysis. States were not cherry picked. Findings show that districts experiencing greater incentive cost burdens have fewer overall revenues per pupil, depend more on local sources besides property tax, spend less on teaching salaries, and are more likely to be underfunded. A second paper was published in Community Development. It's entitled, "Making the Students Pay: the gross cost of property tax abatements for U.S. school districts. It was published in December of 2022. And it finds, given the cost inefficiency and cost ineffectiveness of many awards, the long period of time before profits come in, and the critical need for closing the funding gap in public education, more judicious use of tax incentives is called for. This would set a dangerous precedent. There are going to be far more solar facilities in our county, and we believe that this would set a dangerous precedent. We believe that the public school system needs this money. If businesses want to locate here and take advantage of all the school system provides for the community, they should help pay for it. We already have issues with teacher compensation. We don't need to make the issue worse. We need to take advantage of companies wanting to locate here, not give up that advantage. Thank you.
Those were all of the papers I had. Were there any other ones that were potentially stuck in the copier that we need? That was it? Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, next we have the consent agenda. Mrs. Loring.
Good evening. The only change that Human Resources has in presenting the personnel actions for you this evening is on the superintendent sign-offs. What's listed here is number 6. That resignation has been rescinded by the individual, and therefore we can delete it from tonight's considerations for personnel action.
All right, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda, deleting number 6 on the superintendent sign-offs?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any discussion?
I've gotten several complaints that there are foreign nationals on the consent agenda. My question is, is that true? If so, are these people being given housing, these teachers? So should I tell you which number, or I guess you know who I'm referring to? Just some teachers have complained that it's easier for these, and I have nothing against them because I have family in those countries myself. So, but teachers are concerned that they are being given certain privileges that they claim that they've been asked to help find housing for some of these. I'm not sure. Are they from other countries? I don't want to mention the country,
Right. Well, what I can verify, because, obviously that would be some personnel information that is involved in a candidate and an individual. But the list that you have in front of you are teachers who may not be residents, but they are certified qualified teachers for the position. There are no privileges above and beyond what a normal teacher is receiving, a regular teacher. What those teachers, there's a misunderstanding, and what those teachers and staff members are being asked, because there is a housing, a limited number of housing opportunities in Jefferson County that are affordable. If they are aware of any housing that this individual could have, not that we're not providing anything. It's just a resource. It's just, do you have any knowledge of housing that would be available in the area for somebody moving into our county?
and they're not being assisted in getting certification. They're not being given any kind of financial assistance other
They're
than
being
what?
treated just like any other teacher.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the consent agenda with the deletion of number 6 on the superintendent list, say aye.
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 Oppose? Thank you. All right, next we have unfinished business. 10A, action on approval of a vendor for the Page Jackson walk-in freezer.
We have two vendors for you this evening for consideration for the Page Jackson walk-in freezer. First is Russell Refrigeration with a bid of $40,790.34. The second vendor being Central Restaurant Products with a bid of $32,950. Our vendor recommendation for you this evening is the Central Restaurant Products.
Is there a motion to accept the vendor for the Page Jackson walk-in freezer as Central Restaurant Products?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne, Ms. Ogden. Any questions?
Yeah, just quick question. Page Jackson already had a walk-in freezer. Is that correct? This is something that we had to replace.
We had to replace it. The current walk-in freezer is at the end of life.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, all in favor of approving the vendor for the Page Jackson walk-in freezer as Central Restaurant Products for $32,950, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, we have possible action on the Wind Hill Solar Pilot Agreement request.
All right. Well, thank you, board, for having me back again. As a reminder, my name is Chris Sternhagen. I am the principal developer of the proposed Wild Hill Solar Farm. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time tonight updating you on the progress of our pilot proposal since we last spoke on May the 8th. There's been some public comment that we've received through over the last few weeks that I want to share with you, offer an opportunity to ask more questions, and diligence our proposal a little bit further as well tonight. First, I did want to say congratulations to Dr. Gibson on her retirement, as well as offer my sincere thanks and gratitude. Dr. Gibson has been very courteous and professional to work with over the past year. And in these days, those are virtues that we don't often see as much as we used to. So thank you very much for your time. Good luck with the retirement and whatever the next steps are. As a follow-up to my presentation on May the 8th, we made two adjustments based on comments from the board then that you should have in front of you. If you do not, we'll make sure you get those. The two adjustments, the first we made was to the pilot agreement itself, which was a correction to the term, a change from 30 years to 39 years, which was brought to our attention by Dr. Joy here. Appreciate that. And then the second adjustment that we made was to the proposed board resolution, removing the reference to STEM funding for the capital contribution that's being proposed as part of the pilot proposal, which would leave the capital contribution to be used at the board's discretion. Additionally, since our May 8th meeting, I presented our our pilot proposal to the Jefferson County Commissioners. They offered Q&A and as well as public comment at that time, and that was on May the 15th. We have provided all the information to this board that we also provided to the county commission. So if there are any questions with that additional supplemental information, I'm happy to take those tonight or at some point in the future. Through the public comment period at the county commission, as well as some information that we received at the May 8th meeting here and comments in between, I wanted to spend a little bit of time just making some clarifications around some of the information with the pilot itself. First is with regards to the proposed pilot arrangement, a clarification that this is an opportunity that's provided by West Virginia statutory code to any business that seeks one. By West Virginia statutory code, this isn't a special favor for solar. It's not a special favor for renewables. It's available to any and to all. Now, the writers of that code, I can only imagine, had the foresight, and Jefferson County and West Virginia in general benefits from the idea of flexibility, that perhaps the tax structure that we put in place will not always be sufficient to meet the needs of our communities. It may be too burdensome for the businesses that might come that we haven't foreseen. And therefore, we're going to provide by statutory code an opportunity for businesses to seek tax abatement, a payment in lieu of those taxes. Now, why would they do this? They do this as an economic tool, a fiscal policy tool to incentivize economic opportunities for their communities. They understand that for a healthy school system, for a healthy community, we need healthy businesses. And to the commenter earlier, tax-paying businesses, which Wild Hill Solar fully intends to be. But those economic opportunities need to benefit all. So let's talk a little bit about some of those economic opportunities that Wild Hill Solar provides the Jefferson County community and clarify for those exactly where the energy is going to go and what the project will do for the community. So let me first start with the ag economy, which is a big part of the Jefferson County economy. Now, you heard from Mr. Ziegler earlier, and he touched on some of the benefits of a solar project like Wild Hill for him as a farmer. I come from a farming background. My family has farmed for over a century. The township that I was born and raised in is named after my ancestors who immigrated from Norway. Now, after the Civil War, my ancestors moved to Western Minnesota, built a home and started farming. And we've been farming that, my family's been farming that land ever since. Throughout those years, you can imagine that the farm has changed and it looks different. What started as wheat and small grains evolved into cattle, evolved into dairy, it evolved into corn and soybeans. Now we have sugar beets. Now I can imagine that my ancestors never in a million years would have thought that sugar beets would be grown on their farm, but here we are. And today, if you look across the landscape of my home community, you also see windmills and you see solar panels intermittent throughout the landscape. These projects provide fixed revenue to those farmers, which is critically important in today's ag economy. As you heard from Mr. Ziegler, the family farm is struggling right now. Costs are incredibly high. The business model for farming is incredibly difficult. How many businesses do you know that will invest a couple hundred to $1 million in the spring and just hope and pray for rain and a return on that investment? That's pretty scary if you think about it, but that's what our farmers do. They invest a lot of money without any guarantee of a return on investment. And as a result, the family farms are not making it in today's commodity market environment. They're consolidating or they're outright selling to development or cashing in on their land. A project like Wild Hill provides them with a fixed revenue source that allows their farm to stay financially healthy and allows them to continue farming the way that they have and the way that their parents and their grandparents had before. It secures our farms going into the future. That is a huge benefit locally, especially to a community that is driven by an ag economy. Another economic opportunity that Wild Hill provides, and that's jobs. First, on the construction side of it, this project will take about 12 months to construct. We'll employ approximately 200 construction workers, from general labor to skilled trades. This project has signed a memorandum of understanding with the local building and carpentry trade to provide those jobs locally that pay a living wage and support families that live in this region. 200. Now, we had a little bit of there was a misplacement, I believe, of the sign-in sheet earlier. So a lot of constituents behind me that are in support of those jobs were unable to speak, so I'm going to speak on their behalf. From the Eastern Atlantic States of the Regional Council of Carpenters. The United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners Eastern Atlantic States Regional Council will be supporting the Wild Hill Solar Project in Jefferson County, West Virginia. We know the need in our communities of this project has the potential to make a huge difference in the lives of many of our members, as well as their families. We are committed to helping this project move forward with a memorandum of understanding in place between the West Virginia State Building Trades and EDF Renewables assures this project will use skilled local workers and apprentices. Can I get a show of hands for those of you that are here and support that statement? So a comment was made on the May 8th meeting about what's in it for Jefferson County, West Virginia. And some comments have been made that those jobs don't matter. I got a bunch of people behind me that think those jobs matter quite a bit, and I do too. In addition to the construction jobs that a project like this will provide, there are up to four full-time operations and maintenance technicians that the project will maintain as well. Now, these are good jobs, paying a living wage, full benefits for 4 families here locally that I'm pretty sure will benefit from our project as well. And yes, they will pay all their taxes, just like everybody else, I guess. The next benefit I want to talk a little bit about is the environmental benefits. A vote for Wild Hill Solar is a vote for clean air, and it's a vote for clean water. These projects do a lot by adding perennial grasses for the ground cover that help leach out any foreign substances and help clarify our water supply. These projects take CO2 out of the atmosphere, leaving cleaner air for our citizens. Now, that is very different, I believe, from the last pilot that was in front of this board. Very different, as a matter of fact. We also provided you with an economic impact analysis that was done by a third party that estimates an economic benefit to West Virginia and Jefferson County at approximately $173 million. Now, earlier there was a comment made about the potential inequity of pilot agreements and the resulting burden on a school board. Now, I have not read specifically that study that was referenced earlier, but I do look forward to reading it and looking into it. But what I think I heard was that in many instances, the burden that a project or business is placing on a school district outweighs the benefit of the revenue that the project is bringing in. I didn't hear any rebuttal. In fact, I heard support for unique revenue streams outside of traditional bonding and levying. That's what this is. Now, this project will only have 4 permanent O&M technicians. I understand that 4 may not seem like a lot. And in this regard, it maybe isn't. It's not going to put a big burden on the school districts. At least it's unlikely. But consider this. The tax proposal that we have put in front of this board, as well as the county commission, totals approximately $28.5 million in revenue. Now, breaking that down by year, that's $200,000 a year under the pilot arrangement. That's a $250,000 one-time capital contribution agreement, and then a $400,000 annual lease payment to the county. Relative to the taxes that are levied on the real property today, that's in addition to. On a per parcel basis, in the first year alone, that's $100,000 more than what's currently being generated by that land. That's a significant amount of money. Any which way you look at it. And here's the kicker. This is a passive photovoltaic solar project. Set back from the road, well over 1,000 feet, sited on private property with vegetative screening all around it. It emits no noise. It will have no impact on the everyday life of any Jefferson County citizen. And here's the other one. It doesn't come with a cost to the county. This project does not need new roads to maintain. This project does not need new utilities to maintain. These are burdens that taxpayers often pay. This is revenue without a cost to this community. Now, there's people in this community that don't want to look at it. They think it's ugly. There's other people that do. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as we all say. I have neighbors that don't like dairy cows and they live in the country. To each their own. But at the end of the day, this is a project that will impact a number of people in a positive way, and really nobody in a negative way. Now, there was a question too that was put to public comment about why does Wild Hills Solar need this when another project, I think Blake Energy was referenced, doesn't. Now, I can't speak specifically to what Blake is doing, but I can tell you that pilots and tax abatements like this are very commonplace in the energy business. And if I had to guess, at some point, that project will probably be here in front of you asking for a pilot agreement. Now, I don't know why they haven't been here yet, and they've already started construction. But I've done this for 17 years, and I've worked all across the United States on different renewable energy projects. And a tax abatement for a project like this is critical. Without it, the project does not stand to make revenue, and that precludes investment in this community. $173 million in economic value. Pretty significant. Now, to clarify another benefit, and that's the use of the energy. There was a comment made that this energy will only serve, I think you said high income users or something to that effect, which is absolutely not true. A little bit of Energy 101, and I apologize for reiterating this because I think we went through this when I first presented to you all. But the way that our transmission system operates, once an electron, much like water in a pipeline, once an electron is generated and put on our transmission system, it will go where the load draws it. So we turn our lights on, we draw energy, electricity to our homes. A business turns their plant on, they draw electricity to their facility. Nobody can control that, save for controlling the light switches and the on and off switches that are in the region. Now, Wild Hills Solar Project is interconnecting on First Energy's 138 kV line. There's no overhead transmission lines. We're gonna plug right directly into that line. 138 kV is used for regional distribution of electricity. That is a sub-transmission level voltage that is not intended to drag power very long distances. Physically, it can't. The physics don't work. So the energy that's generated by Wild Hills Solar will it can almost guarantee will be used regionally in First Energy's load zone. So those entities that First Energy serves, this energy will ultimately serve, which is here regionally and locally. So in addition to the economic benefits that Wild Hills Solar brings, the environmental benefits, and also clean energy benefits as well, again, at no cost to the county citizens. Finally, I'd ask you to consider the funding needs of both the school district and the county, which we know are out there, and the alternative of finding revenue sources than Wild Hills Solar. I understand that the school went through a bond referendum, which is always a difficult thing to do for the administration, for the board. And I understand that you guys are sitting up here not with the interest or the desire to get into tax policy and make decisions around statutory tax code, but really to support your community schools and your students. And I understand that. And I know that this can be very difficult and somewhat emotional. But if you really boil it down, it's a mid-sized solar project that's going to help the environment, that's going to provide revenue at no cost to this community, take the pressure off of the tax-paying citizens of this community in a unique way, which I think is what that study was referencing, to look at unique forms of revenue. Just make sure the price is right, right? So please keep that in mind, because a project like this stands to benefit quite a few and in multiple different ways and without much cost at all, without any cost to our local citizens. So with that, I will offer one final comment and then any questions you may have. To the extent that there is additional due diligence that the board would like to see information, we're happy to provide. I'm happy to sit down with anybody and walk through that sort of information. But I do ask that the board consider the diligence that they may require to vote on this matter and start that diligence in earnest very soon. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions?
I do.
Sorry.
I think it would be helpful, at least from my perspective, is to help the community understand all the different pieces. Obviously, we're still trying to figure out all the different pieces, but where, we have heard from several of the people who, own the land, and I feel very strongly they have a right to do with their land what they want to do. Obviously, within reason that doesn't impact someone else. Obviously, you being here is because now it trickles to someone else as far as the financial obligation, but for their land, they should be able to do that. I do get the farming piece. I would not personally myself like to see 100 houses on the land. I don't want to have to deal with all that traffic. That's why I like living here. But at the same time, other people don't, right? They want all those houses so they can have other things here that we don't have. So I totally understand, the conundrum that you guys are under. For us, you're exactly right. I can speak for me. And I've told you before, we just want to do education. We want to do kids. We don't want to be involved in business. And I hate the fact that the state has set it up that way, period. That's just, to me, wrong. It would help if you could help to provide that. Okay, so we have 4 parcels of land or 3 parcels of land. I can't remember, the different. Each one of those landowners currently pays X number of dollars in taxes. If it stays farmland, this is the money that we receive. If we have to enter into a pilot agreement, this is now the yearly revenue that the county receives, for this many years. Something basic that everyone can help to be able to see and understand. Also, me personally, I would like to see something from the state, either an ethics ruling from the state attorney general, something that basically says, why do we have to be involved in a pilot agreement? We are in education. We want these people to work. We want these people to do with their land what they want to do with their land. And we would just like to love and educate children. And yes, we need money to do that. So why are you doing this? Why does this work? And also an understanding specified and very, very clear from the county commission on how exactly the payment to the county commission, that it is absolutely specified, that it is divided out then as it normally would be with the tax base, that the school gets a certain percentage, Parks and Rec gets a certain percentage, Fire and EMS gets, and that is specifically in writing, so that then we can say to our constituents in our community, this is what's in front of us, and either this, yes, we have to be involved in this, or from the state, we now have have a ruling that, no, we don't have to be involved in this. And, you know, you, ominous dominus, you go by and you go ahead and do you, we're going to keep doing us, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may, and let the county commission and planning and commission and zoning and all those other people who ran for those positions for a reason, 'cause that's important to them. They get to make those decisions, and then, you know, we can go argue with them about where's our money. But at least we would have that information to be able to make that decision. So for me, those are the important things. I don't know about some of my other fellow board members, but I appreciate the time that you've taken over and over again to try to make very clear what we're trying to do here. And I think last but not least as well, if you can speak to when you're providing the information, in the newspaper, I think I had seen that there were like 4 total solar projects, and Wild Hill Farm was listed as one of them. And so I don't know, like, is someone else over the other ones? Are they all 4 different companies? Like, how is this looking to plan out? And if Wild Hill Solar is an entity in and of its own, then that information is going to be very important, because you're exactly right. Those other people are going to be doing, I'm assuming, the same thing, because this is the position we're in with energy in the state of West Virginia.
Correct.
So that would be, again, important to me. And if where it would be located, if it can provide power, maybe even for free, to Blue Ridge, Blue Ridge in Washington, you know, that might be nice too. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions, all very good. Hold me to making sure I get through them all. So with regards to the property taxes currently levied against the land that's under lease and part of the project itself, we have 6 parcels of land, all in agriculture production right now. The first parcel, the 2022 property tax levy is, and these are going to be approximates, I won't give you down to the cent, but I think you get the idea. About $2,400 in property taxes for 2022. With the pilot, and this is going to be true for each of these parcels because I levelized the pilot across each of them. The net gain in year 1 is $100,000 per parcel. The other parcels that are involved for 2022, one will pay $419 in tax. One will pay $168 in tax. The fourth will pay about $3,400 in tax. The fifth will pay about $3,200 in tax. And the sixth will pay about $3,900 in tax. That revenue does not change. In addition, with the Wild Hill Solar project, you're looking at $100,000 per parcel added to that on revenue in year 1 alone, escalating at 2.5%. A portion of it escalating at 2.5%. So it's a significant increase in revenue on a per parcel basis. On to the question about something from the state. That one I'll have to follow up with you on. The statute itself is clear, and I copied and pasted the language into the PowerPoint, but we can provide you with some additional supporting information. But for an energy project, which Wild Hill Solar would be, the tax levying bodies of the local jurisdiction would need to agree to the proposed pilot arrangement, which in this case would include the Jefferson County School District. If there were an easier way to achieve a reasonable tax amount, we would be seeking it. Because trust me, as much as I enjoy talking to you all, it's definitely not my most favorite thing to do. No offense. You know, the other thing I'll note there is a lot has been said about this is a tax break, why them and not me? And I can understand that sentiment, but what this really is a request for a reasonable tax amount. This isn't us trying to shirk tax. This is acknowledging that the tax structure as presently established is obnoxiously burdensome. This is a mid-size passive solar farm with 4 full-time employees. Without a pilot, that's $110 million in tax. That's not reasonable to me. And I think everybody would agree with that. With the pilot as proposed at roughly almost 29 million, that would still make Wild Hill Solar one of the highest tax-paying businesses in Jefferson County. So please keep that context in mind, because these projects just don't make sound economic sense without a pilot. And you can reference Blake, but I'm pretty sure that at some point they're going to be here asking the same. And you are correct. There are at least 4 total projects that are proposed in Jefferson County. 3 of those have their permit, one of those being Wild Hill Solar. And I know for a fact that at least 2 of those will be here asking for a pilot, and they are waiting and watching to see what happens with Wild Hill. Did I get everything? Okay.
Can you give us a bit more of a idea when you say local jobs? Is that local West Virginia jobs? Is that local Maryland, Virginia jobs? What are we talking about locally?
We haven't hired everybody, so I can't give you a list of exactly where everybody lives, but the intent behind partnering and the memorandum of understanding that we've executed is that those jobs will be regional jobs from this area. At this point, that's as much definition as I can give you, but it does assure you that the people that were building this are not going to be coming from 2 or 3 states away. And had my constituents behind me had an opportunity to comment, I'm sure they could have provided a little bit more color than I can.
She did ask, was there anyone else?
I'm sorry?
She did ask, was there anyone else that we had lost your paper? And if you wanted to comment, they had every opportunity to comment. But I just wanted to know with the four people,
Mhm.
about how much money would they make? What would the salary be?
Salaries do vary by region, as you know. The same job in West Virginia might pay differently than the same job in Wyoming, for example. But on average, those salaries are north of 60,000 a year with full benefits.
Here in Jefferson County?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say at a minimum. Mhm.
Yeah, as a school board, it's not our job to determine which businesses come into the county and which don't, how many jobs you provide, how many jobs you don't provide, where those jobs come from. You know, that's not our place to do. Our place is to make sure we're fiscally responsible to our school system. And you keep speaking of taking the pressure off tax-paying citizens. Last time you provided us a chart, and it wasn't in today's packet, but it showed how much the county commission gets, how much the school system gets. You don't have to go back and go through those numbers, because I remember, I think we were getting like 14% of the pie or whatever it was. I mean, it was a lot smaller than the, 80-some% that we would normally get. The other thing you keep talking about, being one of the highest paying taxpayers. Are you also one of the highest paying revenue makers? I mean, how does the tax compare to your revenue?
So on the first question with regards to the payment distribution, I want to clarify. So the pilot arrangement, the pilot revenues specified in the agreement, which is first year $200,000, escalating annually at 200 or 250. I can't remember off the top of my head now. But that agreement is by statute is subject to distribution by the county, the same as property taxes. That cannot be changed, as I understand it. at the present levy rates and bonding arrangement, 77% of property taxes go to Jefferson County Schools, 33% go into, I don't know, a general fund or whatever with the county. The pilot revenue would be subject to the same distribution. So 77% of the pilot revenue would come to the schools and the 33% would go to the county. Then there's the $250,000 capital contribution, which would go directly to the school,
The one-time payment.
one time, right? Now, the county does receive a lease payment that is separate from the pilot arrangement. And that's $400,000 a year for that lease, flat.
And the schools get no part of that, correct?
Correct, unless the county decides that they want to distribute some of that. So the interesting thing about the lease arrangement that's separate from the pilot is that the lease arrangement is not statutorily subject to be distributed the same as property taxes. So that gives the county commission discretion over how they spend that money and where they spend that money. Now, we've heard quite a bit of discussion and comment at the last county commission meeting that I attended about some of the funding needs from the county specific to EMS, specific to firefighter services and things like that. You know, and this arrangement, you know, would go a long way to help provide those services, which benefits everybody. Now I forget your other question. I'm sorry. There was
Tax
two.
versus revenue.
Yes, the revenue side of this. So I can't speak to our specific annual revenues, not on public record, but under NDA, I can provide that information. It puts me at a competitive disadvantage with other generators if I disclose the energy rate that I'm selling at and hurts my business. But under a non-disclosure agreement, I can share some of that. I can share, however, with you that a project of this size on the capital cost side is going to cost us upwards of about a little over $200 million, most likely. So you compare that to the net present value of the tax structure at $110 million total. I think you get a sense of how unfair and unreasonable that tax burden is given the capital investment versus the roughly 29 million on a net present value that we're looking at.
Are there any other questions this evening?
Okay, Chris might be able to answer, I guess, a couple of those questions a little better.
Thank you. Hi, it's nice to see you all again. I'm Chris Callis with Jackson Kelly in Charleston. I just wanted to address a couple of things that I heard that Chris was not able to address specifically in your questions. Ms. Ogden, you asked, why is the school board involved? Very good question. I understand that's, this is the last thing you'd like to be working on. The reason is that under 819.4, Chapter 8, Article 19, Section 4 of the code, which is the specific pilot arrangement that deals with power projects, and that is the one that we propose to use here. The school board is specifically called out as a required signatory. Why is that? Why did the legislature set it out that way? I'm not sure, but I think it may have had something to do with the fact that it was understood that school boards, as prime takers of revenue for property taxes, ought to have a say in whether a pilot arrangement with a power project ought to be approved. I can't speak to more than that, but that is the statutory justification for us being here. If we just had to meet with the county commission, that's what we would be doing. You asked about whether there might be something from the Attorney General that would bless, as I heard your question, bless a pilot arrangement. I know of no AG opinions that do that. I do know that this specific statute has been acknowledged as a basis for pilot arrangements for power projects in a Supreme Court decision of several years ago involving a gas-fired peaker plant, or not peaker, but a CCGT plant. I think that was probably 2017, 2018. I can get that site for you if you'd like. Finally, Commissioner Skinner asked about the relationship between taxes and company revenue, and Chris said, not surprisingly, that that's something that we can share in the context of an open meeting. But I did want to offer the observation that there really isn't a direct relationship between company revenue and any taxes that would be abated or reduced under a pilot arrangement. And the reason for that is taxable income gets taxed under income taxes, state and federal. Those are not taxes that are abated here. By contrast, the taxes that are implicated by a pilot arrangement, primarily personal property taxes in this case, and by extension of county ownership, the state B&O tax on generation, neither of those have to do with any of the revenue or profit or loss position of the company that benefits from it. Finally, I'd be remiss if I did not speak to Ms. Weimer's comment earlier at the outset that the public school system needs the money. Yeah, I'm sure it does. They all do. That's why it should be easy. This should be an easy decision for you. I'm scratching my head. This is a decision between not having a project and having no additional tax revenue, or having one and getting some more. I don't know what else to say. It would, in fact, this decision that we were asking you to make would, in fact, set a precedent. The question is, what kind of precedent is that going to be? A positive one with regard to additional revenue for the schools and for the county, or a negative one in view of this project and the ones that are going to follow? Do you have any questions that I can answer?
Well, you did say there are no relationship between, revenue and taxes, but there are, because taxes, if you paid the full tax, it would decrease the revenue. So, I mean.
Yes, there's an inverse relationship in that way.
Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right. If you paid the full amount of taxes, you would have less taxable income to pay. But on the other hand, and I think as we've said from the outset, without a pilot arrangement, there is no project and there is no revenue.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the semester exam policy to put out for review and public comment.
Yes, ma'am. I take it that you probably don't have a deep and abiding interest in semester exams. So you are more than welcome to take this opportunity without hurting my feelings to go, but that's certainly up to you. Yes, ma'am. Sometimes people feel like, oh, well, she's talking. I don't want to be rude. I'm talking about semester exams. Unless you want to have bad flashbacks, to like AP bio in high school. I want to just release you. Go with God. You're so welcome. Take care. Sorry, I had to do that. Because I can always sense this kind of like, So at our last board meeting, the advisory committee that was appointed by the board came before you and gave you their final report. They presented the results of their research, and their concluding recommendation at that time was, and I quote, eliminate semester exams and give assessment autonomy to professional educators. The board then directed me to create a draft policy regarding semester exam and to bring it back to this meeting to be posted for public comment. That is in your folders and online in board docs. And in short, it states that Jefferson County Schools does not endorse the practice of semester exams as a tool for instruction or assessment. Teachers, as educational professionals, have the latitude to provide assessments in a wide variety of formats, such as projects, exposition, essay, multiple choice, etc., related to the content. However, in no case should a single assessment exceed 10% of a student's total grade. So that is, in its simplest format, broken down, the proposed policy simply to put out for public comment, not for a vote by the board tonight.
Okay, is there a motion to put the semester exam policy out for public comment?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second? Is there a second to put the semester exam out for public comment? All right, I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yeah, first of all, I think out of courtesy to the new superintendent, we shouldn't create any more policies until the new superintendent is able to give his opinion and expert advice. That's one thing. Second thing is the wording of this policy. I personally disagree about whether it's wise to endorse exams for learning. It may be that the way that we do it isn't appropriate, but certainly exams are used for instruction and assessment and are necessary, not necessarily paper and pencil exams, but various exams that are mentioned. Third is at the bottom. However, in no case shall a single assessment exceed 10% of the student's total grade. So when teachers create their the grading system, a lot of times tests are worth 25%. And a lot of times, like in math, when I taught at Jefferson, sometimes we would have many quizzes, but maybe we would only get through 2 tests in one quarter. And that would mean that these tests would be equal to 12.5%. So then they would be violating this policy. So therefore, they would have to change their whole grading system to adapt to this policy. I just think the wording could be better. And again, I think that we shouldn't send out any policies. The new superintendent will be here in 2 more board meetings, and I would like to know what he has to say about exams.
Dr. Gibson-Lauren, did the committee look at the verbiage of this?
No, ma'am, they have not, but we can send it back through that committee specifically and ask for their wording on this. Be
So we
happy
could
to do that.
Go ahead and put it out for public comment tonight, but make sure we get their feedback during the public comment period. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, ma'am, I am not. The board asked me to bring you a policy based on what the last presentation was. If you would like me to filter this through the advisory committee before bringing it out to post it, I am more than happy to do that. Or if you would like to wait and have Dr. Bishop, I did provide him as part of the transition planning. I provided him with a copy of the PowerPoint and access to all of the policy documents. Again, that's a decision of the board about how you'd like to proceed.
Personally feel that it should go back to that committee, then they should look at the wording, and then we need to look at it with the new superintendent as well.
I do agree.
I definitely would like to see the committee look at the wording on this before we put it out. My thought would be as well, if we could be provided, we have I think a good opportunity to see where we had no semester exams and we had, well, maybe kids didn't take it seriously. Maybe that's why they didn't do well, where at the end of the year, we had exams that counted. So I would like to know from those exams, how many students did not graduate because of failing exams? And how many students' grades were impacted either positively or negatively due to those exams that they took? So that at least we also have a basis like we did before for that decision and how it may affect kids since they knew it was weighted, they knew it was going to be important. Hopefully they took that a lot more seriously than the first time.
So
And we might
just
have some good
checking for
data.
understanding, you would like a couple of things. Number one, you want me to take this and for the members of that semester exam committee, send it to them, say, here's a draft, revise, review any of the wording to take it back to the board. Number two, you would like the same analysis that we did of first semester exams in terms of its effect on grades. You'd like us to do the same for the second semester exams and then compare those, bring them back to the board. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
And
Okay.
also adding to that, the piece of, did we lose any students to graduation due
Okay.
to those semester exams?
Yes, ma'am.
I think the most important thing is just to run it by the committee and have them get their eyes on the verbiage. That's my concern, because I know that they spent a lot of time and effort and worked really hard on the studies that they did and everything else. So I don't want to, I would just like them to give it their stamp of approval.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, Madam President, can I rescind my motion?
Yes, ma'am. Motion withdrawn.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. I'm up next too, so
Oh.
I believe I'm up next.
Next, we have action on approval of the school-based law enforcement officer agreement for Washington High School.
Yes, ma'am. This is an annual agreement for the school resource officer at Washington High School. As the board is aware and the public may or may not be, we have separate agreements for Jefferson and Washington High School because they fall in separate law enforcement jurisdictions. So this is the annual agreement. There are no changes to the terms of the agreement for Corporal DeSarno to serve as the school, well, it's for a school resource officer that happens to be filled by Corporal DeSarno right now at Washington High School.
And this is for the 23-24 school year, correct?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the school-based law enforcement officer agreement for Washington High School for 23-24?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the school-based law enforcement officer agreement for Washington High School for 23-24, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Mrs. White. Next, we have the approval to go for bid for asphalt at South Jefferson Elementary, Harpers Ferry Middle, and Page Jackson Elementary.
Yes, ma'am. We're asking that you approve those particular sites for this year. We do have asphalt on a rotation as asphalt is wearing out on school properties. So we're going to begin our replacement cycle with those schools. Please know that in the future, we will add other schools as new budget cycles come around.
All right. Is there a motion to go to bid for asphalt for South Jefferson, Harpers Ferry Middle, and Page Jackson? Thank you, Mrs. Bratton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, thank you. I guess you're still here. Request approval to seek a contracted vendor for flooring services for Jefferson County Schools.
Right, as you know, we've been removing and replacing a lot of carpet and flooring wears out. So if we're able to secure a vendor and lock the flooring in at a particular price and have someone on hand, it's going to make the process smoother and the price better. So we're seeking your approval for that this evening.
I'll move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. All in favor of approving to seek a contracted vendor for flooring services for Jefferson County Schools, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Next up, we have request approval to go, it must be summertime.
It is, yes.
Request approval to go for bid for an attendance window at Jefferson High School.
Right. This project I know we've discussed for security reasons, and so we're going to make that happen in this budget cycle so that when you enter Jefferson High, you can see an individual before that long walk to the office.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second, and then I just have a quick question.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden.
Where are we looking to put that window?
Now, Ms. Ogden, I knew you were going to ask that. I've looked at it with Mr. Caton, but I can't quite remember the semantics of where they're going to put it. I believe it's probably the corner, you know, where you see that little window that sits there anyway. That's where I think they're going to extend it out and make it so that that person's more visible and has a permanent space there. Right now, there's a window, but you don't see anybody in it, and there's a table where someone sits. So if you'd like more information, I'm happy to have Brandon share drawings with you, but it would be so that that person could sit in an office and be at that window all day.
Okay, yeah, definitely would, because she's there.
Correct.
But I mean, I've
You
been
know,
to the
how they
window
sit at
several
the
times,
table.
but
Yeah.
I'm thinking it makes sense to maybe bring it to the actual double doors before you
Right.
get into the building, which would be beneficial, but I can't quite picture losing that much hall space, but.
Well,
yeah,
I don't
just
think
out
you'll
of
lose,
curiosity.
I don't think you'll lose the entire hall. We had Randy and Brandon work on a look at that, so
Okay.
I can be more specific with you once I see the drawing again, but absent of that, I don't want to draw something that's new.
Okay,
for
thanks,
you.
I appreciate it.
All right, any other question or discussion? All in favor of approving to go to bid for the attendance window at Jefferson High School, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have request approval to go for bid for restroom upgrades as part of the bond project.
That is a bond project that we've set aside money for. So we actually took a rubric and went through, had a committee that comprised of the bond people that went through and assessed restrooms. And of course, Harper's Ferry had the ones that in the historical section that were in the worst condition. We do plan to renovate those. That is pending. Hopefully that will occur this summer. We're having some issues with vendors being able to get partitions. Also in just all school restrooms, we're wanting to put partitions in between urinals as well. So every school will get a little something out of this project.
All right, is there a motion to approve going to bid for restroom upgrades?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton. All in favor or any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have request approval to go for bid for district-wide pest control services.
Yes, we're in need of a new pest control vendor, so we're asking that we can go back out to bid for one.
Their motion?
I move.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving to go for bid for district-wide pest control services, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have RFP for athletic trainers at the two high schools. Good evening, Mr. Banks.
Good evening. Our current contract for athletic training services is through Athletico, and locally that is Pivot Physical Therapy. That contract has expired, so we're requesting an RFP to go out for bid for the, not for bid, but an RFP for athletic training services, and this would service both high schools.
All right.
I
is there
move.
a move. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Mr. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. How do we ensure next year that we do this earlier, or do we? I just feel like we've already done this year. I don't know why. Maybe we just do it so often that, because we have to do
Yeah,
it.
it's a 3-year contract,
3 years?
right?
3 years.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who's been sleeping for 3 years?
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, so is there I'm thinking just with the contract ending the end of June, And, you know, I saw that on the proposal that it would be, the bids would come in. We meet on that June Monday and the 26th, and I think I read in this that the RFP would go out, they would be opened on the 27th. But then we would not be able to vote on that, I would think, until that July, middle of July meeting.
Right.
So, you know, the fact then that we don't have those services, like, do we have specific things going on that we need them? Number one, do we?
No,
like, how do
no
we-
required things that they have to be there for, as you know. There's certain things that are required for athletic training services to be at. But during the summer months when there are practices, those requirements aren't as strict as when we have competitions. So
Okay. It's also my understanding that our neighbors to the side are poaching our trainers. They'll remain nameless. In case I have to see them at a meeting and want to be nice to them. But that being the case, they are actually looking at this as a position to where instead of utilizing a service, they would be a person that was actually hired that could then also teach that type of a class, as well as be a trainer, and then be paid a salary that might pay them more than that, so we could keep them. So that does sound like a smart idea, but I mean, obviously, we're kind of at the end here, but how do we look at some of those opportunities ourselves?
I don't have all the background historically on how it's been done in Jefferson, but my understanding is that we used to have our own trainers, and then it became so difficult that we thought it might be easier to find somebody if we contracted with someone. Now we're contracting with them. We're still having difficulty finding people. As you may or may not know, Jefferson has a trainer employed through Athletico, but we've been unable to secure one for Washington. But we have met with that particular company, and they're working hard to try to find somebody for Washington. Not that they would get the bid, but there aren't a whole lot of different companies that offer that. So they may be bidding on it again.
So if we put the RFP out, do we also have the option of looking at it from a budgetary standpoint when they come back to, you know, offer the options for us, that if we aren't going to get them to guarantee us a position, a person at Washington and at Jefferson, is it possible to look at an actual person that is willing to take at least a position?
I think it's
And what the
possible,
difference in money would
but
be?
I do know that counties that have that in place can't find anyone either. So we'll do whatever it takes, you know. If we can't find someone through a company in an RFP, then we'll make a proposal to try to hire our own. But it's such a vital piece to success and health and safety of our kids that we really need it.
Yeah, I'm thinking long-term, it's another grow your own program
Yeah,
that,
good
you
idea.
know, for the high schools especially, that we could
Yeah.
have classes and training ongoing to get those
Mhm.
college credits in. I think Shepherd does actually offer that as a program, so. I think
Yeah,
it's
with
a
the
program.
position at Jefferson, we're actually thinking about adjusting that person's schedule if the same company is the successful bidder, so that they could teach classes as part of the day and have student athletic trainers. So
Awesome, thank you.
you're welcome.
So, Mr. Banks,
Yes, ma'am.
as you have mentioned, so we've been paying Pivot contractually.
Right.
However, they have not fulfilled their end of the contract.
Right.
So with this RFP, how do we make sure that whatever company that we choose, that we don't run into this situation again?
We've had this situation all year, so we have not been paying Pivot for services for Washington High. And that's built into the contract and will be for whatever company that is a successful bidder.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to go out for bid for athletic trainers at the two high schools. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, next we have the McCormick grant recommendations for school year 24.
Are you ready?
Ms. Schwartz.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks to Mrs. Carter and Ms. Harner, I think you should have the most updated chart in your agenda. If you didn't receive or weren't able to access the documents I emailed you after I was notified, the document was incomplete. So if you don't, I have a couple extras here. Okay, good. As you can see at the top of this year's chart, the amount that we have is $150,000. 1,800 goes to administration costs right off the bat for the secretary treasurer who handles all of the financial stuff throughout the year. 10,000 we recommended for the media center at Jefferson High. That brings the total to 138,200. Now, generally, the media center receives 10% after administrative costs. However, there is a current balance of $5,536.43 in the media center fund, which will carry over to 23-24. So if you add the 10,000 to that, they would have a total for that for $15,536.43. And then next year we can look and reevaluate again whether we want to adjust it. Last year we had voted to or recommended to keep a $5,000 buffer in there for costs like calculation errors or shipping and handling that they neglected to put on the grant or incidental occurrences. So this year we have $6,800. So we'd like to take that $1,800 from there to drop it back to the $5,000 buffer and put that back in. So that leaves us with $140,000 to grant. Now, before we delve into the committee's recommendations, allow me to explain about one particular area in which we can no longer recommend funding. That would be for any cost that involved paid personnel, such as choreographers and directors who must be board approved, and their pay must go through the Jefferson County Schools payroll, which involves taxes. And before I continue, please note that I am not an accountant, nor do I understand tax laws involving trusts and foundations or what they do at the Bank of Charlestown. So if you have any questions in that regard, I will most likely not be able to answer them. But per their regulations, the Bank of Charlestown informed us McCormick grant money cannot pay taxes. Therefore, to ensure we stay within the regulations that they have by whoever governs all of that, we as a committee wish to err on the side of caution by not recommending any funding for paid personnel or staff. The other caveat I'd like to address is that when we initially started vetting the grants last week, or the week before last, we were trying to fund as much as we could. So some grants we recommend partial funding, but as we went through the grants one by one, members of the committee made valid points as to why some things didn't meet the criteria for funding or we needed further information. So that brings us back to the grant recommendations. So the first one is Krista Crawford. She requested $7,500 for dance class choreography, spring dance costumes, props, and music. We reduced the amount by $120 and removed publicity from the expenses. And the reason is in our discussion in the committee, there should be no cost for publicity since Jefferson High School has 2 poster printers and copiers. All activities are posted on the webpage and the principal includes them on the weekly robocall. And the Jefferson County Board of Education has a Facebook page where the activities can also be promoted. So we are recommending $7,375 for that grant. The second one is Ms. Crawford, and she requested $11,000 for charisma choreography, costuming, and visual elements. The choreography costs in that grant were $5,000, and we reduced that amount to $2,500 to include only choreography, not the choreographer. The reason is that that's a posted position. Staff personnel should not be funded via McCormick grants. In addition, taxes, Social Security must be deducted, and McCormick cannot pay any of those taxes. And I did talk with Ms. Crawford about this, and she understands because she's had to deal with it a little bit this year. So she gets it. So we reduced hers to $8,500 as a recommendation. Larissa Elliott, $13,000 for color guard flags, poles, weights, carts, storage totes, costumes, air blades, prop carts, pro cart, PVC accessories. We reduced it from $2,000 for some quartz and storage totes and prop cart and the PVC accessories, because some of the carts are used and we didn't do some of the other carts because they're used in the field show as part of the show. So we reduced that and recommend $11,000. Jennifer Glimpf, $1,200 for an Appalachian storyteller workshop. That's a guest speaker, no taxes involved. For the workshops, Adam Booth, and we recommend that in full. Catherine Joswick, $28,073.23 for science, bio equipment and supplies, and we recommend approval in full. JP Lynch, $3,000 for drill design for marching band field show. We recommend approval in full. JP Lynch, $16,250 for 2 piccolos, 1 arch top guitar, 2 marching mellophones, 1 grand Keelon marimba, field cart for the grand marimba, Winger deluxe percussion workstation, and 1 Latin percussion super gyro. And we recommend everything but the Winger deluxe percussion workstation, which holds instruments that do not seem to be a part of the instruments requested in this grant, or are they a part of the station? So we reduced that to $13,450. Hannah Myers, $7,000 risers to replace broken and older risers. And we denied because although the music classes use them for performances, risers alone don't promote education. If we recommended funding for risers, traditional classroom teachers could claim desks and tables are necessary for their students to perform, and that is something the Board of Education should provide. And McCormick supports, not supplants. Hannah Myers, $20,000 for show choir choreography, costumes, music arranging, copyrights, and set design. And we recommend that in full with the caveat that choreography is funded, but not a choreographer. And then Myers and Garland put in one for sound equipment for the auditorium. We approved any overage from we got a quote, but it was later. But any overage needs to either be paid by the county or come out of theater fine arts funds. It should be noted that many entities use the auditorium that are not affiliated with Jefferson High School. And an inquiry from the committee is, what does the building use monies cover, and could it be used for upgrades in the auditorium in the way of sound, lighting, etc. And then the last one is the $30,000 grant for the Fine Arts Department for the spring musical. And we denied it. Because with the suggestion that they resubmit with the remaining money, because consulting fees cannot be paid as they are posted positions requiring tax deductions like the director. Publicity costs can be removed since it can be done as listed above for the charisma. Miscellaneous expenses is too vague or broad. But the biggest reason the committee denied the grant is because the principal has not approved the musical Mean Girls or any other musical at this time. Mrs. Myers, Ms. Crawford, and Ms. Garland will be alerted to this, and the suggestion will be made that they resubmit after securing approval from the principal and recalculating and specifying their anticipated estimated costs. So we had $140,000 to grant. The original amount requested was $147,023.23. The amount we are recommending to be approved is $102,598.23, with $37,401.77 remaining. And so we do have money remaining that will open up back up in the fall, and we'll also alert those involved with the school musical what's necessary for the grant to be considered. Additionally, at some point, either before the grants are reopened or definitely prior to next year's applicants, we will revise the guidelines to include not funding paid personnel and staff, how items need to be more specific rather than listed as miscellaneous or as needed, that publicity posters and such is handled through the system, as well as the fact that the school has poster printers. We also decided that since many groups also fundraise, one question that should be included on the application from this point forward is, what is their fundraising monies used for? That was a question that came up to us. So lastly, grants will likely not be vetted prior to June in forthcoming years, since in the last 2 years, Bank of Charlestown has not been able to give us a total as early as they used to. The vice president with whom we corresponded recommended that we set up our vetting meeting more toward the end of May. So it will probably, I don't know if it'll be this early in June next year. So that's all I have. Any questions?
I have a question.
Before questions, can we make a motion to accept the recommendation of the $102,598.23?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All right, discussion or questions?
You mentioned several of those requests that you went back to the person who requested and offered that they resubmit. I was just curious, you didn't say that for Mr. Lynch about the percussion workstation. Does he have, did you go back and talk to him?
I
or-
didn't really talk to any of them. I contacted when all this came about and we were running through things, we contacted Chrissy to see, because it didn't really specify choreographer. So I questioned her as to whether when we were still voting, as to whether or not it included a choreographer. And so she said yes. And so we amended it to just be for the choreography. I haven't spoken to the fine arts people. I was kind of waiting till after this meeting before I did. But it will be open to everybody. So if he wishes to resubmit, he can.
So will he be given an explanation as to why it wasn't?
Yes, I
covered?
always give them an explanation as to why things aren't included.
Okay, and I have one other question. You said that the musical hasn't been approved or any musicals. Is that because of timing that you expect them to eventually be approved? It's just late or?
I don't really know why they didn't submit for approval before they submitted the grant.
Oh, I see. So they have to get it approved before I say, okay, thank you.
And just a little caveat there. Long time ago, when musicals started coming through here, the Pirates of Penzance was recommended and approved, and the royalty costs were way higher than they expected, and they wanted to change it to the Wizard of Oz. And I just figured that was okay, and got blasted by a board member, not one of you all, about that. So that's why we're very careful about this kind of thing.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the McCormick grant recommendations for $102,598.23, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, ma'am.
See you.
We appreciate you sticking around all evening.
Hey, before you sneak away, I just want to say thank you. I know your job is not easy. And she is the chairperson from McCormick Grant, Suzanne Swartz, and I just want to thank you for all your work and making Jefferson High School and all the student success a priority.
All right, next we have action on resolution regarding the submission of a complaint to the West Virginia Ethics Commission. An oath remains the highest standard of commitment to our society. When each of us took office, we publicly recited our oath of office. This oath was a public promise to perform our duties to a high standard. Our constituents expect a high level of accountability and actions based on this promise. To break this oath is a break in the bond of our public service. One of the most important duties we have as a school board member is to hire our superintendent. I am excited and grateful we have found a strong superintendent in Dr. Bishop. I'm incredibly disappointed in how the process went. The search firm that we hired had all board members sign a confidentiality agreement prior to releasing the names of the candidates to us. Between the time of the interviews and the announcement of the name of the successful candidate, there was a breach of confidentiality by a board member. This had the potential to disrupt the process and put the board and all candidates in a very bad position. We attempted to give the successful candidate the professional courtesy to give his people notice of his departure in his own voice. Meanwhile, we had members here in Jefferson County in our community sharing the name of the successful candidate prior to the public announcement. With this being said, I would ask that the board vote on a resolution for an investigation into the confidentiality breach by the West Virginia Ethics Commission. And the resolution reads, whereas West Virginia Code 6B25 sets the ethical standards for elected and appointed officials and public employees, subsection A provides persons subject to section. The provisions of this section apply to all public officials and public employees, whether full or part-time and whether compensated or not, in state, county, municipal governments and their respective boards, agencies, departments, and commissions, and in other regional or local governmental agencies, including county school boards. Whereas West Virginia Code B25 subsection E provides confidential information, no present or former public official or employee may knowingly and improperly disclose any confidential information acquired by him or her in the course of his or her official duties, nor use of such information to further his or her personal interests or the interests of another person. Whereas the West Virginia Ethics Commission and its probable cause review board are charged with the investigation and resolution of violations of the West Virginia Ethics Act. Whereas the West Virginia Ethics Commission has admonished public officials and employees, you may not during or after government service knowingly and improperly disclose confidential information acquired through your public position or use it to further personal interests of yourself or another person. Whereas preserving confidential information by public officials and employees is essential to the effective government and relied upon those who deal with it. Whereas February 6, 2023, Superintendent Dr. Bondi Shea Gibson Learn resigned effective June 30th, 2023. Whereas on February 27th, 2023, the Board of Education of the County of Jefferson voted to employ the firm of McPherson and Jacobson to coordinate a search for a new superintendent for Jefferson County Schools. Whereas on April 25th, 2023, all members of the Board of Education executed a confidentiality agreement by which they agreed to keep confidential all non-public information, discussions, and processes in connection with the review and selection of applicants for superintendent of schools, and not to discuss confidential information with any person other than McPherson and Jacobson, the other members of the school board, or any agents authorized by the Board of Education. Whereas before May 30th, 2023, public announcement of the successful candidate for the position of superintendent, a member of the Board of Education are believed to have shared confidential information with members of the public concerning the identity of the applicants for the position of superintendent and the deliberation by the members of the Board of Education in the course of the selection process. Whereas these disclosures of confidential information by members of the Board of Education are believed to violate the West Virginia Ethics Act. Be it resolved, adjudged, and ordered that a verified complaint shall be submitted to the West Virginia Ethics Commission for the investigation and resolution of the violation of the West Virginia Ethics Act by a member of the Board of Education. I know that's a mouthful. Is there a motion on the resolution regarding the submission of a complaint to the West Virginia Ethics Commission?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion?
Yeah. Who is behind this? Like, who is the one who is initiating this? I'm just trying to understand, because we have schools to build and we have teachers, we have a teacher shortage. We are, the academic achievement is a serious concern, and we're spending our time on hearsay. And I'd just like to know, I hope this isn't coming from the new superintendent, because this is concerning. That to me, you know, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And I don't want to bring up people's personal issues, but there was an ethics violation that I'm aware of that was committed.
We're talking about this resolution right here.
So, but if you're going to have an investigation, we need to investigate the whole process because there have been several ethical violations and legal violations. There was a violation of the sunshine laws at the last board meeting. I think the entire hiring process should be reviewed. Some candidates were given questions ahead of time, and that wasn't fair to all the candidates.
I'm not sure what you're speaking of.
Well, that's just one issue. There are several issues, and to cherry pick because there is a thought that one person may have told somebody. I mean, we don't even know if it's out of malice. I mean, you can accidentally. I remember when I spoke with somebody and they said they knew who the 3 candidates were. And my response was, great. That way I don't have to worry if I accidentally say anything.
Ma'am,
And-
we're not going into details right now because.
Well,
I
I'm
don't-
just saying that I think that number one, making this public is inappropriate because there's no opportunity for us to discuss all these other issues. And I feel like as soon as, if this board decides to do this without hearing all the other issues and considering them, it appears that there's bias and I don't think it's coming from a good place. It just seems like people are being targeted. And I feel like it's inappropriate. My big concern is that somehow this would put a wedge in the relationship with the new superintendent, especially if, because anyway, that's a concern. So I don't think that's a good idea to start off that way. I think maybe there should be an opportunity for all of these issues to be put out in the open. I know that, like I said, there was a serious violation at the last board meeting or 2 board meetings ago, the sunshine laws. We were told we were going to vote on a superintendent and instead board members were attacked, harassed and threatened. And I mean, that's inappropriate. We did not say that's why we were going into executive. So, that's just one issue. There were things in the contract. The company was supposed to go to the people who didn't get hired. But one of our board members did that without the board's knowledge or consent. That's a violation that is written on this paper, the same thing. I mean, that's confidential information that one of these board members, they violated code 6B2-5. So again, I just think there are too many violations, too many issues with this whole hiring process. And to find one person to point fingers at when it's based on hearsay, it's inappropriate. And everything I've stated is not from hearsay. I mean, there are witnesses. There's more witnesses to more things. So I just don't think this is appropriate and it's not a good idea for the new superintendent. And, whoever this is that you're referring to needs to have a conversation with the new superintendent and get off on the right foot, because even if you do this, nothing can come of it. There's nothing that they can do, the Ethics Commission. And they will tell you that there's nothing they can do. They can give their opinion, but violating the sunshine laws is illegal. And if I was the person that you were considering, doing this ethics complaint against, then I would turn around and have more serious charges filed, which are definitely illegal. An ethics violation, that is not, it's not something that, nobody was harmed. Everybody, he got the job. The man got the job, so there was no damage. There's nothing that you could, nobody suffered. But when you hide from the public, you tell them that you're going to do something and you do something different, that is a violation. I mean, that's the way I see this. And I just think this is completely inappropriate. I mean, you can express your anger, but that's your personal feelings, but it doesn't give you a right to start pointing fingers.
Any other comments?
I just would like to see us get off on the right foot with the new superintendent and move along.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor for supporting the resolution regarding the submission of a complaint to the West Virginia Ethics Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, opposed?
Opposed.
All right, 3-2. Thank you. Advisory committee reports, we have none this evening. And then board member comments. Mrs. Bratton.
I don't really have anything. Thank you.
Ms. Rosborn.
Epic picked up a new county for security officers. I think it's Tyler County that will be working with us for security officers now, and we were really happy to add them to our group.
Excellent. Ms. Ogden.
I checked in with the local libraries that the levy funds help to support. And Harper's Ferry would like to announce that they have a growing number of resources for the ESL and IEP students and have increased their programming and materials for all the populations in Jefferson County. Summit Point as well has been increasing their children's programming and their preschool reading program. They do use the Libby app for people who don't use that, LIBBY. And you can get resources online and do audiobooks and read right through your phone. They have continued their order and pickup window service that they had during COVID, and people have really liked that, so they decided to keep that. And Shepherdstown Library has reported that they, since opening the new facility, are overjoyed. They have given out over 1,000 new library cards since last year. They are doing some STEM and math talks as well to try to support the students in Jefferson County, and are doing about 45 different programs per week. So just encourage you, thanks to the taxpayers who do support the levy and the monies that do fund the local libraries in that way, and just encourage students to absolutely use those resources this summer and keep reading, keep reading, keep reading. Thank you.
Dr. Joy.
June is Pride Month, and so I want to remind everyone that that we should not only tolerate but view all of our citizens, especially our students, as entitled to equal rights and treatment under the law and just by being human beings. June 17th is the Juneteenth celebration at Evetts Run, and there's a drumming, hula hoop contest, and free food. I understand that West Virginia Day is celebrated at the same time around the corner, but it would be nice to visit Evetts Run on that day as well. Not a lot to recognize students, but I had asked the community for input on recognizing personnel, and I got several recommendations. I'll start with the I guess, honorable mention. I wanted to recognize that Miss Marcus, a parent, was very happy that when her son's sign was destroyed, defaced, Miss Marcus took it upon herself to replace the sign for the child and the parent so that they have this wonderful memento of his graduation. But the overwhelming response was for Mr. Banks. So I wanted to recognize Mr. Banks this month as just somebody that I appreciate and many members of the community appreciate. Some of the things that I am aware that he did in the last few weeks, he helped straighten out a class schedule situation at Washington that many teachers feared would be devastating for students. So he deserves recognition for that. During the adult ed graduation, when Dr. Gibson couldn't be there, Mr. Banks stepped in and did a wonderful job. At graduation, Mr. Banks went above and beyond, as I said before. Anyway, I have a thank you card, but I left it in my car. One more thing, people have asked if I sent out an email or a text. I did send a text message out, and because for several reasons, I wanted to get the community's input on the grading. I've gotten, I think, 83 responses. And so that's very helpful because we have to vote on the semester grading issue. I asked about what people would like to see in the new superintendent. What should the priorities be? And I will share that with the superintendent. I also asked if, for the recommendations of just employees that they notice going above and beyond. You don't have to complete it. It doesn't come from the board. It doesn't come from the school system. It came from me, and I appreciate people that responded. So I think that's everything. And one more thing, no, I did not steal data from Weebus as I was accused. The information was taken from public records, from voting records. So the names, your phone number, your birth date, your address, everything is available to the public, just so you know that. Okay, thank you.
The only thing I have is I believe summer school started today. Is that right, Dr. Gibson-Learn? So our summer school and enrichment program. So thank you to all of the staff that are working that instead of, enjoying their summer. We appreciate that because I don't know how many kids we have enrolled in that, but I know it's been a very popular program in the past couple of years. So thank you for doing that. And Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments this evening? All right. And then we do have an executive session with 3 personnel actions. 2 personnel actions. Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session for personnel?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All in favor, say aye. Oppose? Thank you.